Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Always fun to dig into these.
Today, we're really getting into some fascinating material.
Yeah, this one's a classic.
My Experiments with Truth, Gandhi's autobiography.
I feel like everyone knows about Gandhi,
Right, like a household name,
but few have really delved into his own words.
which is what we're all about here.
Exactly, getting past the surface and into the nitty-gritty.
And there's a lot to unpack just from this outline.
Oh yeah, his life was anything but ordinary.
Strict upbringing, early marriage, dietary experiments.
Talk about prime material for some intense moral development.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, how did all that shape him
Well, it's clear his childhood really laid the groundwork.
for his later commitment to truth and nonviolence?
Exactly. You can see the seeds of it even in those early anecdotes.
Like refusing to copy spelling words. Come on, even as a kid.
Right. Talk about taking things literally.
It shows that strong sense of right and wrong.
That he seemed to have from a very young age.
And then stealing the servant's ring and the guilt that followed.
He writes about confessing to his father.
Such a powerful moment of reckoning.
Yeah, and how much it impacted him moving forward.
Almost like those early struggles set the stage.
For that lifelong pursuit of truth.
Testing boundaries, figuring out those lines.
Yes. And he mentions being captivated by plays.
The ones with moral dilemmas.
Exactly like the story of Shravana.
Refresh my memory.
The devoted son accidentally killed by his own father.
Oh, wow, intense.
And these stories really resonated with him.
Shaping his sense of justice and duty.
It's fascinating to see those influences at work.
And all of this before he's even a teenager.
I know, right? And then comes marriage at 13.
I can't even fathom that.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
And he's so open about the complexities of that experience.
He doesn't shy away from anything.
The excitement, the challenges.
Even his struggles with controlling his desires.
It's incredibly honest and vulnerable.
It really humanizes him.
Especially when you think about the image most people have of Gandhi.
As this almost saint-like figure.
Right, and then there's the whole meat-eating phase.
It seems so contradictory to the Gandhi we know.
It really does.
It was a brief period influenced by friends.
Who thought it would make him stronger?
Yeah, but he clearly wasn't comfortable with it.
And eventually returned to vegetarianism.
Even more committed than before.
He actually refers to it as his mission.
Which is interesting, foreshadowing his later activism.
It's like each experience, even the seemingly contradictory ones,
Became building blocks in his evolution.
both personally and philosophically.
That's a great way to put it.
And then comes another big shift. His journey to England.
To study law.
A whole new world.
Definitely a huge culture shock for him.
I can only imagine.
He talks about the isolation he felt, the struggles to adapt.
To new customs, new food.
But amidst all that, he also finds a deeper connection.
To his own vegetarianism.
Yes, he meets like-minded people, explores the philosophy behind it.
So there's discomfort, but also self-discovery.
He's finding his voice, his purpose.
And it continues to evolve in South Africa.
Where he goes after England.
This is where things get really intense.
It's a turning point for sure.
He encounters racism and discrimination firsthand.
The infamous train incident.
The one where he's thrown off for refusing to move.
To the third-class compartment designated for Indians.
It's such a powerful image.
Infuriating, a true catalyst.
This is where Satyagraha is born.
His philosophy of nonviolent resistance.
For those who might not be familiar.
It's more than just passive resistance.
It's deliberate, strategic.
Combining truth, nonviolence, and a willingness to suffer.
For a just cause.
Appealing to the conscience of the oppressor.
Exposing injustice through self-suffering.
And ultimately forcing a moral reckoning.
So South Africa becomes this crucible.
Where his ideas are tested and refined.
In the face of real oppression.
But it's not just his public life evolving.
This is also when he makes the vow of brahmacharya.
The practice of celibacy.
A pretty radical commitment.
It was influenced by a close friend.
Who advocated for brahmacharya.
Yes, and Gandhi also delved into religious texts.
That emphasized self-restraint.
He believed celibacy was essential for spiritual purity and self-discipline.
Crucial components in his pursuit of truth. And he involved his wife in this decision.
Oh, absolutely. He mentions having open conversations with Kasturbai.
And she agreed to the vow.
Just one example of the complexities of their relationship.
It's a fascinating thread throughout the book. It seems like Gandhi was always seeking a more simplified life.
both personally and politically.
And that's where his commitment to simple living comes in.
Rejecting luxuries, washing his own clothes, challenging others on their reliance on servants.
The story about Gokhale's scarf comes to mind.
Oh, that's a classic.
Gokhale was so attached to this specific scarf,
He claimed he needed a servant to care for it,
and Gandhi challenged that.
arguing that true independence meant caring for even your prized possessions yourself.
Such a simple act, but so symbolic.
It speaks volumes about his evolving philosophy.
Of self-reliance, both for individuals and for India as a nation.
Exactly. He saw reducing wants and embracing simplicity.
As a path to greater social equality and freedom.
From material dependence.
It's a theme that's still relevant today. All this is fascinating, but I'm curious about his dietary experiments.
He went way beyond just vegetarianism.
I've heard about the fasting.
Oh yeah, he became increasingly interested in that.
Not just for health, but for self-discipline.
And as a way to purify the body and mind.
He undertook some pretty intense fasts.
Some lasting weeks.
There's that story about the beef tea for his wife.
Oh yeah, when Kasturbai fell ill.
And the doctor prescribed beef tea.
Which obviously went against their vegetarian principles.
And Gandhi was furious.
He saw it as a betrayal of their beliefs.
It's a really powerful anecdote.
It shows that tension between personal conviction
and the well-being of someone he loved.
He was grappling with those complex dilemmas.
Just like any of us would. And then giving up cow's milk and eventually even goat's milk.
He even expresses remorse over the latter.
It shows that internal struggle.
He wasn't just adhering to dogma.
And he was constantly experimenting, pushing boundaries.
And sometimes even regretting his choices.
It makes him seem so human.
Definitely makes him relatable.
We've seen him as a child, a student, a husband.
A budding activist.
It's been quite a journey so far.
And it only gets more fascinating from here.
What happens when he returns to India?
That's where he truly comes into his own as a leader.
Bringing everything he's learned with him.
His experiences in South Africa, his evolving philosophy, his personal struggles.
And he applies it all to the fight for India's independence.
It's a pivotal moment.
I bet this is where we see his Satyagraha principles.
Put to the test on a much larger scale. But before we dive into that,
okay,
it's important to understand the context of India at that time.
Set the stage for us.
Imagine India in the early 20th century under British rule.
Widespread poverty, social inequality.
A growing sense of resentment and frustration.
With the colonial government.
And various nationalist movements are gaining momentum.
Sounds like a powder keg.
In a way it was.
And into this volatile situation steps Gandhi.
Fresh from his successes in South Africa.
But he doesn't advocate for violent revolution.
His approach is rooted in Satyagraha.
Appealing to the conscience of the British.
Through nonviolent resistance.
Which at the time must have seemed pretty radical.
It was. But Gandhi believed violence would only make things worse.
Perpetuate the cycle of hatred and oppression.
Exactly. He saw nonviolence as the more powerful path.
The more moral path to true liberation.
Absolutely.
So how does he start? What are his first moves?
He starts by listening.
Listening.
He travels all over India, meeting people from every walk of life.
Really taking the time to understand their struggle.
And build a network of support.
Laying the groundwork before taking any drastic action.
Exactly. And his first major campaign is a strategic choice.
The Champaran Satyagraha.
Where he helps indigo farmers fight against exploitative landlords.
We talked about that earlier.
It was a resounding victory.
Proving the power of Satyagraha.
On Indian soil.
And establishing Gandhi as a leader that people could trust.
A turning point for him and for the movement.
But it was just the beginning.
From there, he leads other campaigns.
Each building on the last, refining his strategies.
And further solidifying his leadership.
The Ahmedabad mill workers strike the Kita tax resistance.
He's constantly learning and adapting.
Always with the goal of mobilizing the masses.
Through non-violent resistance.
And he's not just directing from afar.
Right. He's living, simply spinning his own cloth, even cleaning latrines.
Putting his principles into practice.
Leading by example.
Showing people what it means to live a life of service and simplicity.
His actions spoke louder than words.
It wasn't just rhetoric. It was about embodying the change.
And that resonated with people.
So he's building this incredible movement.
Challenging the British Empire.
All while staying true to his core values.
And it all culminates in the non-cooperation movement.
This is where things really escalate.
They do in response to the repressive Rowlatt Act.
And the horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre.
Gandhi calls for nationwide nonviolent resistance.
People from all walks of life boycott British goods.
Refuse to cooperate with the government.
And engage in peaceful protests,
It's a remarkable display of unity and defiance.
all inspired by this one man.
And his commitment to nonviolence.
What a powerful moment.
It shakes the very foundations of the British Empire.
But there were challenges, right?
Of course, there were outbreaks of violence, disagreements within the movement.
I imagine leading a movement of that scale
With such high stakes.
is incredibly difficult.
It was, and Gandhi wasn't immune to those challenges.
The Chari Chara incident,
Where a mob turned violent and killed police officers,
it really shook him.
he realized the immense responsibility he carried
And the importance of constantly reinforcing those principles.
of nonviolence and self-discipline.
It's easy to forget that even Gandhi
This icon of peace
had to grapple with the complexities.
and the imperfections of those who followed him.
It's a good reminder that even in movements dedicated to peace,
There will always be challenges.
this is an amazing start to our deep dive.
We've only just begun.
We've seen Gandhi evolve from a boy grappling with moral dilemmas,
To a leader inspiring a nation.
and we're just getting started.
There's so much more to explore.
I can't wait to dive deeper into those later chapters,
And see how his experiments with truth.
ultimately shape the course of history. Picking up where we left off.
Yeah, his journey is fascinating.
It's amazing to think about the impact he had on India's fight for independence,
Especially considering his background wasn't really in politics.
right? He started as a lawyer.
And yet he became this iconic leader.
It all really started with those early organizing efforts in South Africa,
Absolutely. Those years were so formative for him.
not just in developing Satyagraha,
But also in honing his skills as a leader.
the Natal Indian Congress.
The organization he founded there.
It was a crucial training ground.
A testing ground for his ideas and his leadership.
What's interesting is that he didn't start out as this confident, charismatic leader
Right. He actually describes himself as pretty shy and unsure of himself.
in those early days.
Kind of a reluctant leader in a way.
Thrust into that role,
Almost by accident.
and he had to learn as he went,
But he rose to the occasion, figuring it out step by step.
learning how to organize, negotiate, mobilize the community.
And remember, this was all within a system designed to oppress and silence them.
So the stakes were high from the start.
Absolutely fighting for basic rights like voting or property ownership.
When the system was stacked against them at every turn,
There was an uphill battle for sure.
the Natal Indian Congress faced constant setbacks and disappointments.
They used legal challenges, petitions, public awareness campaigns.
And of course, nonviolent protests.
Gandhi had this incredible ability to use every tool at his disposal.
So it was a multifaceted approach.
He was playing the long game, chipping away at the system of oppression bit by bit
It's like he was laying the foundation.
for the larger movement to come.
And that unwavering belief in the truth and the power of perseverance,
That he cultivated in those early years.
it became a hallmark of his leadership style.
Throughout his life.
It's inspiring to think
That
about,
never gave up hope.
even in the face of such adversity,
And it's clear that those experiences in South Africa really prepared him.
for the even bigger challenges he would face in India.
No doubt about it. He honed his leadership skills.
Gained invaluable experience organizing and mobilizing people.
But most importantly,
He solidified his commitment to nonviolent resistance.
as a powerful tool for social change.
Speaking of commitment, I wanted to touch on his dedication to simple living.
Oh, absolutely. That was a core part of his philosophy.
It goes so much deeper than just personal choices.
He truly believed that true social change had to be reflected in how we live our daily lives.
The Phoenix Settlement.
The intentional community he founded near Durban.
It's a perfect example of this. For those who aren't familiar, can you tell us a bit more about the Phoenix Settlement?
It was essentially an experiment in communal living.
Simple living and self-governance.
People from all different backgrounds came together,
To live according to Gandhi's principles
growing their own food-sharing resources.
and practicing Satyagraha in their daily interactions.
It was a microcosm of the society he envisioned.
For an independent India,
They even published their own newspaper, Indian Opinion.
which became a vital tool for advocating for the rights of Indians in South Africa. Gandhi, the journalist, that's not something you hear about very often.
He was a prolific writer. He used Indian Opinion to educate, inspire, and mobilize the community.
It's amazing how he was able to connect all these different aspects of his life.
Social activism, spiritual practice, simple living, and even journalism.
He saw them all as interconnected
Every action, no matter how small, was an opportunity to live his truth.
and contribute to creating a better world.
There's that famous quote of his, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others."
It really encapsulates his philosophy.
Fulfillment came from dedicating yourself to something larger than yourself.
To a higher purpose.
Exactly.
His dedication is undeniable. But he also faced many obstacles along the way.
Even at the Phoenix settlement,
It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
he talks about interpersonal conflicts, financial struggles, even a devastating fire.
That destroyed much of their property.
They faced real-world problems just like any other community.
So even in that idealistic setting,
They couldn't escape the realities of life.
but they persevered
Rebuilt, learned from their mistakes.
and came out stronger.
Gandhi saw those challenges as opportunities for growth and purification.
He really believed that facing adversity head-on strengthens our resolve.
And our commitment to our ideals.
And then there's that incredible story about the plague outbreak.
Oh yes, during the time of the bubonic plague,
Gandhi and his followers volunteered to nurse the sick.
putting their own lives at risk.
It's amazing to think about the level of courage and compassion.
Especially in a time when fear and panic were so widespread.
It speaks to his philosophy of ahimsa,
Nonviolence in thought, word, and deed.
extended to every living being.
It's a powerful example of his commitment to his principles.
These stories really paint such a vivid picture of who he was as a person.
It goes beyond that iconic image we all know.
It shows his humanity, his courage, his unwavering commitment,
He was a complex and fascinating figure.
and his autobiography really reveals that depth.
But we can't forget that he was also destined to play a role on a much larger stage.
His return to India.
That's where his experiences in South Africa truly come into play.
Talk about a homecoming.
He brought back a wealth of experience.
A refined philosophy of Satyagraha.
And that burning desire to liberate his homeland.
That's where things start to heat up.
In the fight for Indian independence.
Absolutely. But before we get into the details of that fight,
Okay.
it's crucial to understand the context of India at that time.
Right, the stage was set for a major showdown.
Set the scene for us. What was the situation like in those early years of the 20th century?
Imagine India under the control of the British Empire,
A vast and diverse country.
struggling with widespread poverty
Social inequality.
and a growing sense of resentment against colonial rule.
It sounds like a recipe for unrest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Various nationalist movements were gaining traction.
And tensions were simmering just below the surface.
Into this volatile environment enters Gandhi.
Fresh from his victories in South Africa.
With his unique approach,
Satyagraha.
this idea of non-violent resistance,
It was different from the approach of many other nationalist leaders.
who were calling for armed rebellion,
But Gandhi saw violence as a trap.
something that would only perpetuate the cycle of hatred and oppression.
It must have been a radical concept to many.
Especially at a time when violence was often seen as the only way to fight for freedom.
But Gandhi saw things differently.
He believed that true power comes not from brute force,
But from moral authority
from appealing to the conscience of the oppressor.
and exposing injustice through acts of nonviolent resistance.
It was a revolutionary concept.
Okay, so how does he put this theory into action?
What are his first steps in applying Satyagraha to the Indian context?
I'm eager to hear how this unfolds.
Well, he starts by simply listening.
Listening.
He travels extensively throughout the country, meeting with people from all walks of life.
Farmers, laborers, intellectuals, religious leaders,
They really took the pulse of the nation.
building a broad base of support.
Exactly. He wasn't rushing into action.
He was laying the groundwork, building connections
Understanding the complexities of the situation.
before making his move.
And his first major campaign in India was a carefully chosen battle.
The Champagne Satyagraha.
His work with the indigo farmers against those exploitative British landlords.
We talked about that earlier.
It was a strategic victory,
That proved the power of Satyagraha on Indian soil.
and it really solidified his position as a leader.
A leader that people could trust,
It was a demonstration of what Satyagraha could achieve
but also a way to unify people.
under a common cause.
And he doesn't stop there.
No, he goes on to lead other campaigns.
The Ahmedabad mill workers' strike.
The Quetta tax resistance,
Each of these campaigns served to refine his strategy
and solidify his leadership.
in the growing movement for independence.
He was a master strategist.
But he never strayed from his core principles.
Even as he's leading these huge movements,
He's still committed to simple living,
spinning his own cloth,
cleaning latrines,
leading by example.
showing people what it means to live a life of service and simplicity.
His actions spoke louder than words.
It wasn't just about speeches and rallies.
It was about embodying the change he wanted to see in the world.
And that authenticity resonated with millions of people across India.
He inspired people to believe in a different way of life.
All of this leads to the non-cooperation movement.
One of the most significant turning points in India's fight for independence.
This is where things really escalate.
Exactly.
This movement was a direct response to the British government's increasingly repressive policies.
You're thinking about the Rollout Act.
And the horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre.
Those events sparked outrage across India
And Gandhi saw it as the moment to launch a nationwide campaign.
of nonviolent resistance.
This is when Satyagraha becomes a mass movement.
It was incredible. People from all walks of life boycotted British goods
Refused to cooperate with the colonial administration.
and participated in peaceful protests.
The sheer scale of it was a powerful testament to Gandhi's ability to unify people.
Under a common goal.
And a major challenge to the British Empire's control over India.
It was a turning point in the struggle for independence.
But I understand this movement wasn't without its complexities.
Of course not. There were instances of violent internal disagreements,
It's hard to maintain complete unity in such a large and diverse movement.
especially when the stakes are so high.
Gandhi was deeply affected by the Chari Chara incident.
Where a mob turned violent, resulting in the deaths of police officers.
It was a tragedy that shook him to his core.
It forced him to confront the difficult realities of leading a mass movement.
And the constant need to reinforce the core principles of nonviolence and self-discipline.
It's a reminder that even in a movement dedicated to peace,
There will always be challenges to navigate.
he was always learning, always evolving,
He never hesitated to acknowledge his own mistakes.
and adjust his course accordingly.
That's what makes him such a compelling figure.
His willingness to adapt and learn amidst such a tumultuous and high-stakes struggle.
It's inspiring to think about his resilience,
His unwavering commitment to his ideals.
even when faced with setbacks and disappointments.
And that unwavering commitment would ultimately play a key role in India's path toward independence.
The non-cooperation movement may have had its challenges.
But it was a major turning point in the fight against British rule.
It's clear that Gandhi's leadership had a profound impact on the course of history.
He left an indelible mark on the world.
But there's so much more to his story.
His personal evolution, his spiritual journey, his continued fight for social justice.
We're only just scratching the surface.
His autobiography offers a wealth of insights into those aspects of his life.
I'm eager to delve deeper into those layers.
As we continue to explore his experiments with truth,
We'll see how all these threads come together.
to create a truly remarkable tapestry.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered about Gandhi already.
His life was so multifaceted.
From his childhood to South Africa to leading the independence movement.
And it's all connected.
Yeah, we've seen how his personal growth influenced his political actions.
And how his experiences shaped his philosophy.
One thing that keeps coming up is the role of religion.
It's central to his story.
We tend to think of Gandhi as this secular saint.
But he was deeply religious, wasn't he?
Absolutely a devout Hindu.
But his faith went beyond dogma,
Always searching for truth and meaning.
drawing inspiration from various traditions.
Like Christianity and Islam.
He saw the common threads,
The shared values.
like truth and nonviolence,
As unifying forces.
transcending religious differences.
We see this in his involvement in the Caliphate movement.
It wasn't just a political strategy
It was a genuine attempt to build bridges.
between Hindus and Muslims.
A testament to his commitment to inclusivity.
And that extended beyond just interfaith relations,
He was a fierce critic of the caste system.
especially untouchability,
He saw it as a moral abomination.
a stain on Indian society,
He even coined the term Harijans
meaning children of God,
to refer to the untouchable,
emphasizing their inherent dignity.
challenging those deeply ingrained social hierarchies.
It was about more than just words, though.
He put his beliefs into action,
In his own ashrams,
creating spaces where people from all castes were welcome,
treated equally.
demonstrating that true spirituality requires dismantling systems of oppression.
It's a message that resonates even today.
His unwavering commitment to social justice.
It wasn't just about political independence.
It was about creating a more just and equitable society.
For all Indians,
And that included economic equality as well,
he understood that true freedom required economic empowerment.
especially for the poorest communities.
He promoted the charkha
The spinning wheel,
as a symbol of self-reliance.
and a way to support local industries.
He even made it a daily practice,
Spinning his own cloth.
encouraging others to do the same.
It wasn't just symbolic.
It was a tangible way to resist British economic dominance.
And empower rural communities.
It was about connecting with the masses,
Promoting economic independence.
challenging the structures of colonialism.
So he's weaving together spirituality, social justice, and economic empowerment.
into this powerful vision for a free and equitable India.
It's inspiring to think about,
A vision that inspired millions.
and ultimately played a pivotal role in India's path to independence.
But it wasn't without its challenges.
Gandhi faced criticism throughout his life.
From within the movement and from those who opposed his views,
Some questioned his methods,
his strategies.
even his beliefs
He had disagreements with other leaders,
about the best path to independence
but he always seemed to navigate those challenges with grace.
and humility.
He was open to dialogue,
Willing to listen,
never afraid to adjust his course,
he was a true leader,
understanding that building consensus requires flexibility.
and a willingness to engage in respectful debate.
It wasn't about imposing his will
It was about finding common ground.
and moving forward together.
Ultimately, his leadership and his belief in nonviolence paved the way for India's independence.
His legacy continues to inspire
People around the world fighting for social justice.
and peaceful change.
It's been incredible diving into his life through his own words.
Seeing him evolve from a boy grappling with moral dilemmas
To an activist fighting for equality.
to a leader who inspired a nation.
And his message remains relevant today.
His experiments with truth.
His commitment to nonviolence.
His belief in the power of love and compassion.
Timeless principle.
That can guide us as we face our own challenges.
We've only scratched the surface
But even this glimpse has offered profound insights.
into his life and philosophy.
If you're interested in learning more,
I encourage you to explore My Experiments with Truth,
it's a book filled with wisdom and inspiration
a powerful message of hope.
that continues to resonate across generations.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Gandhi.
We hope you found it as enlightening as we have.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking truth.